Hello, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning. Welcome back to the SAP's podcast. This is season 1, episode 3 of our The Leftovers Watch podcast. 2 boats and a helicopter. I'm joined, of course, by my 2 dynamic co-hosts, Phil.
Evening, everyone. Happy to be here. Looking forward to it.
Glad to have you here. And, of course, Anthony.
I'm going to be collecting the match ball after this because I'm going to make sure it's a hat trick of great podcasts.
Brilliant. just brilliant. So this is the 3rd episode of season 1 of The Leftovers. We've had a strong start with the first 2 episodes. Having a overall look, I would say, it's covered quite a few plot points and done some heavy lifting to set up the world. But this time, we're going to slow down and we're just going to have a full character study on Matt, who's been in a few scenes in the first 2, but we're going to get a real deep dive on him this week. And also, it's going to be the best episode yet because there's no Tom and none of those 2 fucking twins.
But we don't have his package, though. We're missing out on, the big one.
That's true. We do see Kevin in one scene, but unfortunately, we only see his top half. We don't get good half, We don't get any of the good stuff. So our spoiler policy, as we say every week, we'll be spoiling this current episode and all previous episodes. So that's episodes 1 and 2 from season 1. Boys, are you ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Let's go.
Let's go on 2 boats and a Let's go on 2 boats and a helicopter. So we open with Matt, and this is the first time we're going to get a real good look at him. He's given a sermon about a little boy who's good, apparently. He's not perfect, but he is good. But he starts getting jealous of his baby sister when she's getting some of his attention. So Matt says that he prays to get the attention back, but he gets diagnosed with leukemia. And Matt asks the question, will he be grateful for the suffering and for the attention, or is he going to be angry because of the change in him? And I tell you what, this shit is deep, to start off this episode. And, you got anything to say about this?
Yeah, it's certainly very harrowing and deep, as you say. It was a strong way to open the episode and certainly a reflective one. And yeah, when I saw it, I was quite emotionally invested from the off. So good way to start the episode, I think.
Absolutely, it definitely draws you in straight away. Little side note, so we see the guilty remnant stalking Matt, as we've seen, I believe, in one of the first 2 episodes. But Matt shows his good nature by his maybe surface good nature, you might say. Because, as we're going to get into, this guy is very complex. But he does show his good nature by just smiling at them, and he doesn't scorn them like most people do with the guilty remnant. And then we get the first glimpse of a pigeon that's just outside on the church doorstep, and Matt shoos it away. More on the pigeons as we go forward, don't you worry. So, and Matt carries on now with the story of an 8-year-old girl called Emily who loves swinging high on the swings, but now she's been in a coma for 9 days. And the little boy from the first story is now asking for attention for Emily. Is this brother and sister? I'm really not entirely sure what to make about this whole thing from the start. What do you reckon, Phil?
I thought he was I think he's the little boy in the story, obviously, because I think as you see later on with the flashback, it's clearly supposed to be him. So I'm not quite sure there's any relation to him and Emily. What I am going to quickly say is, though, every time you say the word pigeon, all I'm going to be thinking about is Uncle Vernon telling Harry that you and that bloody pigeon aren't
You're
going
in that bloody
anywhere.
pigeon.
You're in that bloody pigeon, aren't going anywhere. Sorry, Phil. So you think Matt had leukemia when he was younger? You think he's the boy from the story?
I think he's the boy from the story, yes.
Okay.
I'll go into more on it later on when we get to the flashbacks and things, but I'm pretty certain it's him.
Sure. Well, you've genuinely piqued my interest. Sorry, Ant, go on.
I'm on the same page as Phil, but we'll talk more about it later.
Yeah, okay, no worries. Another little side note, so we see that the church is actually really very scarcely populated. You would think that more people would be religious after the departure, But we've got to remember that this is 3 years after the initial event, so maybe initially there was a big upswing in attendance, but maybe it's dropped to an all-time low now because people are frustrated with not having the answers. And have you got anything to kind of offer on this?
Considering that religion, the major religions of the world, had no answers for the departure, you can see why people would abandon them. Something that they haven't mentioned, and it's obviously pure speculation, would there be any new religions born out of the I was going to say the rapture then, it's not the rapture, is it? Out of the departing.
Departure.
So,
do you think maybe the Good Riddance is a new religion?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not large enough to be classified as a religion. It's more of a cult, isn't it? Not sure where the boundaries are, but yeah, I mean, the church is, I mean, kind of, church attendance is on the decline anyway, isn't it? So, but then again, it's in America, isn't it? So they love it over there. So I don't know.
No, it's true. What do you reckon, Phil?
Two things. I'd never really thought about the Guilty Remnants being a religion. That's just literally just occurred to me as we're talking about it. But also, I think because overall you get a kind of sense of apathy and despondence from a lot of people. From the general population, every character we've met, there's not been a single cheerful person. And I think, as the title implies, people just kind of feel like they were left behind. They weren't good enough. So would you really want to go into a religion that may have already deemed you not worthy to kind of get the eternal reward? That was what I was thinking when I was looking at it and the decline.
Yeah, that's fair. Just to quickly pick up actually on the Guilty Remnant as a religion thing, I think that is quite an interesting idea because most worldly religions are kind of put out positive concepts, and by what I mean is like they put out belief systems and things to believe in. Whereas the Guilty Remnant are kind of the opposite of that. They kind of say that there is no meaning. And so it's definitely a very different take on things, but an interesting one.
Well, if you think of the mantra on the first one, kind of we smoke not for pleasure, I think it was, but we smoke to prove our, was it piety, faith or something?
No, I don't think it was anything quite like that. I think it was like, is it like we smoke to remember? It's something like that.
No,
I don't think they talk about faith.
I'm sure when we first heard it, or purity, I'm quite sure, well, maybe we can go back at another point and come onto it, but I thought it was to do with it. I thought it had a pious tone to it. But, I'm happy to go back and listen through.
Yeah, that's something that we can go back and either one of us will be able to say, I told you so, before the evening's out. Now then we get the fucking brilliant music of the leftovers come in again whilst Matt's praying. And then a random guy just comes in, walks up quite ominously to Matt and just starts fucking beating him up. Just in front of everybody in the church, and he ends up stuffing one of Matt's flyers from episodes 1 and 2 into Matt's mouth, so clearly he's got some sort of link to whoever this flyer was about. I have to say this is probably to be expected, and as we'll see from the next scene, has probably happened many times before. But and do you have anything to offer on this?
Yeah, I mean, you can't go printing leaflets of all the bad things that departed people have done, because no doubt they'll have loved ones. It's like, well, it's bad enough they've gone, I've got no answers, but then you're saying they're a bad person. So yeah, that's inevitable. But I guess also as well that most people will have something bad on the record that you could probably dig out. Maybe not on a police system or with internet research, but I'm sure,
No, but that brings up a really
no light without the dark.
That brings up a genuinely interesting point, though. So what is Matt saying? He's exposing these other people, but what is he then suggesting that everybody else is okay? People who weren't departed, or people who were departed, but he can't find anything on. Like it leaves more questions than answers.
Yeah.
So like the guy who beat him up for a start, he's violent. Matt's not environmentally friendly. With all the leaflets.
With all the printing.
Yeah, exactly. There'll be plenty of things.
I can imagine Matt getting sick of everything, of them being called like Heroes Day. I can imagine he's getting quite sick of the idea that everyone who's gone was flawless in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, what did you do when you find what did you do when he's researching someone and it turns out they're all right? Does he just kind of like gloss over that?
No, but that's it. That's it. You're laughing, but that is the genuine point. it's like he's making. We don't know about all the 200 million people, and there's no way that he knows. And so, like I say, it just leaves with more kind of questions than answers.
Here we go, Phil. Yeah, he's got a clean record, but yeah, he did return a library book 2 days late once. Yeah, we'll give him a pass on that one. No flyer. For Phil.
So now then we cut to Matt in hospital after his little beating up. Kevin turns up and Matt doesn't want to press charges, and as I said earlier, it's clear from their conversation that this has happened numerous times before. And Matt says that people need to hear the truth and that Garvey Senior actually understood that. And Kevin just replies, "Well, look where that got him." What are you saying, Phil?
I'm saying it's clearly not the first time this has happened. It's no surprise that it's happened. And I'm surprised by Kevin's. He doesn't really seem to really care that, he's just had this shit knocked out of him. Like, he's
Quite
considering
blasé, yeah.
Considering he's the chief of police, kind of, I'm surprised how I keep using this word, but apathetic to the fact that a priest has just been beaten up in his own church from the congregation. I get it's not the first time it's happened, but you still kind of think, well, hang on, that warrants some form of investigation or some kind of action.
Well, if Matt's not going to press charges, then, there won't be an investigation on that. I think Kevin probably is thinking that, like, yeah, you probably, this is going to be part of the, what's the phrase? Like a hazard of the job or something. I can't remember what I'm blanking on what the actual phrase is now. But, it's just part and parcel of, like, what Matt's doing. He's going to get the shit beaten out of him sometimes, and,
True. But other thing I was thinking about is why, because you've already got one investigating officer standing there with the notepad trying to ask what's happened. So why did Kevin then come down as well? So I thought it was odd that it's already a police officer assigned to the case. Mm-hmm. So why is the chief of police now coming down for something that he's already kind of determined will be forgotten about anyway? I just thought that was, other than to try and set up some kind of link between Matt and Kevin's father later on, there was I didn't really understand it.
That's a very good question. Maybe it's just because it's in Justin Thru's contract that he's got to appear in every episode or something. Something like that. Just a little point as well that I did see my two co-hosts in the lift when Matt goes in.
I have to say I'm rather disappointed, Sam, because I made that joke and then Phil stole that joke and now you stole it off the pair of us. So no, Phil was in the lift.
All that our listeners know. All that our listeners know is that I said it first. They don't know shit otherwise.
Apart from what I've just said.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm sure Sam did it first, didn't he? That's what I recall.
Yeah,
that's what I recall saying.
Ant, will you just be original for once? For God's sake.
I don't like the gaslighting, guys. It's it's bad.
So moving on then, Matt then rejects a call from the bank. So that always means money troubles afoot when you're watching a TV programme. Matt's looking for Emily in the hospital. Emily, of course, from the story from the opening scene. But he finds out that she's now woken up, and Matt gets quite optimistic. Obviously, he's really pleased anyway, but he gets quite optimistic because he says that his entire congregation prayed for her that morning. And so maybe they had an effect, but no, she woke up the night before. And I thought it was quite interesting because even though it's good news, Matt kind of looks slightly disappointed that it wasn't him that had any influence. Did you pick up on anything like that, Phil?
Yeah, you do see his face drop, don't you? You kind of think, poor. You can see he loses his excitement. I'd wonder why she was in the coma in the first place. Because does he mention it at all?
I don't think so. I don't think he does.
Okay, so a 9-day coma without any explanation. Just seemed a bit.
Just another strange happening in this weird world of the leftovers. So Matt then gets a voicemail from the bank whilst the guilty remnant are still stalking him outside. And he then gets a visit from a former parish member when he's in church, and he shows his pretty good nature again, it seems, by remembering the guy and his name. And he asks about his wife, and the guy who's come to visit basically says that no, his wife isn't into religion anymore since the departure, linking into what we were saying earlier about the churches being empty. But he does actually want to get his baby baptised whilst she doesn't know about it. And Matt doesn't really look too impressed by that, to be fair. He looks like, fucking, again with this shit. Again, you're thinking that this has probably happened before. Any thoughts on that, Phil?
So I was trying to. So this answered a couple of questions, because I think this is the first time we see a young child post the event, post the departing. Because I had actually wondered, are there children or newborns being born? Is there new life, as it were? So that kind of answered that question I'd wondered about up to this point. I'd also wonder if it's kind of going back to the father being worried about, is it unbaptized babies go to, is it limbo or purgatory in Catholicism?
Limbo, I think, yeah.
Limbo, okay.
They've got rid of that though, haven't they, recently? Limbo's not a thing, because apparently it's all a bit hypothetical. That's straight up what the Catholic Church said, so yeah.
That's interesting.
Fair enough, yeah.
Got deep there. Sorry.
So then the guy with the child offers to make a financial contribution, but Matt rejects it, maybe showing why he's got some money troubles. And it's clear that he'd rather have the guy ask for his wife to come to church than take the money. But the guy basically just says there's no chance of that happening. And then the guy talks about how his friend had a gambling issue and clears his kid's college fund account. But this guy then departed, so clearly he knows what Matt does and sees this as some sort of payment. What do you reckon about that?
Sure, yeah, there's definitely a theme of gambling in this episode, as we'll no doubt come on to. But yeah, I think where Matt is at this stage, I definitely think he's like a good guy with good intentions deep down, but there's lots of things at work, like his face getting tested. He's trying to somewhat preach that faith, but his faith doesn't directly link in with the events of what's happened, so he's kind of a bit all over the place, isn't he? I think.
Phil?
It sets him off to go to the casino, doesn't it? It sets him on the path to go down to the casino. But I'd kind of thought that seemed quite a trivial. Maybe I'm wrong, but it's saying, oh well, this man had a gambling problem. And he spent his kid's lunch money in the casino. So he had a gambling addiction. It sounds like. Does that really make him a bad person, or just someone with an illness? But the thing I was interested in that he suddenly decides, right, I need to track down and find out more about this person. When compared to, I don't know, I think the man who comes in and beats him up earlier on the episode is holding a letter showing about how his daughter, I assume his daughter, was like selling drugs and things. So it's kind of seemed a bit disproportionate. Kind of, oh, why is this person piqued his interest compared to, the girl selling drugs and things?
I think it's just because it's like the new case, isn't it? And it's the new interesting case. What else can he find out about it? I'm guessing that would be my kind of interpretation on it. So, as Ant said, starting off the kind of links to gambling in this episode. So Matt then goes to the casino, and it's quite funny to note that Matt, as we said, clearly is getting calls from a bank, and then we have a scene in the casino. So yeah, not so subtle about where exactly this episode's going. But he goes there to find out more about the guy who's departed. He tells one of the staff members there about a child rapist and killer who departed right out of his jail cell. Which, took a really deep turn, quite quickly. But Matt explains why he's doing his flyers and his campaign. And he says it's because he needs to separate the good and the innocent from killers and the sinful, because if they can't, then everybody's suffering is just meaningless. Which is pretty deep. So, Ant, let me just open it up to you. Do you agree with that at all?
No, I don't. Probably not, to be honest. I think that you'll never get closure. So I think that people need to move on and agree to disagree. If you were, you're never going to be able to prove anything about those gone, because it's such a high number. And even if Matt could prove that all the people in his local vicinity were bad, it doesn't prove that all the remaining people are good. And that is such a small sample size. You've got the rest of the world to look at.
So Matt then hears somebody complaining at a roulette table, and it turns out that, the pigeons are back, and there's two now, and they've flown onto a table and just completely ruined it. Phil, what was you thinking when the pigeons were first coming up?
So my first thought went right back to Uncle Vernon, as mentioned earlier on in this episode.
and do you have anything to offer apart from Uncle Vernon?
I've actually got a diamond of a point, a real gem here, and it links with the previous episode. So if you haven't listened to that, please go back and listen to it. So we had 2 bagels, and now we've got 2 pigeons. So the 2 pigeons are clearly representing the 2% of people who have departed, and the fact that the pigeons are on a roulette table. Also, there's a bit of double imagery there, and the roulette table reflects that those taken in the departure were randomly selected. And also note, and it's not a complete point, but we had 1 pigeon at the start, and now we've got 2 pigeons now, so things are escalating, if you like. Things are moving on.
Oh, something to think about.
Sam, do you agree that the pigeons represent the 2% of people departed?
Well, when you started talking about it, I was like, here we go. So now any scene with 2 things in, they had 2 cups of coffee, and they're drinking the coffee to show the departure of the coffee, you could do that with a lot. But the point about the pigeons on the roulette table and the randomness aspect, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. What do you think, Phil?
I very much think this is, as we said in the previous episode, at some time Ant will come out with a point, and we'll just have to agree with it because it's absolutely correct. And
it's almost like he stumbles upon them, but it's gold when it comes.
So basically, Phil's point is I like Ant's point, but has no point of his own.
all I was
going to
say is the pigeons depart as well to reinforce your point.
Brilliant. So Matt's
God.
then making new flyers about the info that he's just received about this new guy. But his printer then jams and he gets toner all over him. Even just small things just aren't going right for Matt at the moment. Guilty Remnant is still stalking him, but Matt then gives them some clothes, donates some clothes to them, and he tells the Guilty Remnant that they're just wasting their time. Phil, what do you think about the kind of Guilty Remnant keep popping up in Matt's storyline?
First off, I'm not quite sure who the Guilty Remnants are, Sam.
Sorry, I mean the Good Riddance cult, yeah.
There we go. I've been confused all episode. I find it strange that he's actively collecting donations for them, because if they appeared to be homeless or down on their luck, I'd understand him offering them clothing and things, but I thought it was strange he just kind of came out like, oh, here's some off-white sheets.
They haven't got a range of colours, have they? So maybe he thinks that they just rewear the same things all the time. But then again, I did notice, and I don't know if this is just my lack of observation in previous episodes, it seems like they're branching out from the white into more of like a cream colour. They're exploring different colour schemes.
So Matt then gets in his car, but he actually accidentally answers the phone to the bank, who he's been ducking this whole time. Is that an innocent accidental answer, or is that divine intervention? That's not the first time. That's not the only time we're going to be asking that question during this episode. I promise you that. And who can really say with this program for definite? But then Matt's told by the bank that it's important. He stops by. Phil, were you starting to be concerned when the phone calls kept coming in?
Yeah, I was getting a bit. I was getting a bit concerned. He kept trying to why is the bank trying to call him? Because at this point, you have no idea of the potential for the foreclosure on the church. I didn't even realise it was a family-owned church. I assumed it would be some major denomination, but no, apparently not.
No. What do you reckon, Am?
I don't think it's divine intervention personally, because he's ignoring the calls early on. He's just getting more calls, and he does accidentally answer it, but I'm not sold on that.
Matt then goes over to the bank, and he's told that there's been an offer on the church. We learn that Matt's been ducking calls for about 2 weeks now, so it's not just a one-day thing. And now he's actually only got until the end of tomorrow to get $135,001 all in cash to save the church. That's quite a big ask, Phil. What was your initial reaction?
I was like, how has he managed to default on by so much? Yeah, because at this point I didn't realise he owned the church. I thought it said it was going to be a church owned by a major denomination or something. I thought it was interesting how it seems like he's just been almost shirking his responsibilities to pay that loan, because he doesn't take money from You know, the man who asks, "Oh, what's a reasonable contribution?" For example, he doesn't take money from him, but he must know that he owes money. So I think it's quite almost irresponsible in showing how he's not prioritising his prioritisation's not in the right place.
It's like it's been burying his head in the sand, isn't it, and just focusing on his bigger, mission almost, and not just on the day-to-day stuff. Like, you have to pay your bills.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other thing I thought was interesting was when the banker starts talking about, oh, well, maybe they'll knock it down and build, apartments on the land. And again, it's kind of going back to when I was talking about the baby. I'd got the impression the world had almost become stagnant in the last 3 years, since everyone's departed, because no one's moved on. In hindsight, maybe it's not the right way, but I almost imagine construction stopped, or they didn't really need new apartments, or, that kind of drive to build had gone.
Yeah, no, definitely. You could definitely imagine that, and not that it's something that you would see in every program, but it does make you think. You don't see anything particularly new looking. Like Mapleton seems like a fairly dreary place as it's painted quite a lot of the time. But maybe we're looking into that too much. Maybe not. Maybe we're the world's first to stumble on that. But you never know. So now we're going to get into quite a deep scene, quite a heavy scene, and one of my favourites from the episode. And so Matt goes over to see Nora, and we get a quick glimpse of a family and a picture on the fridge. And Matt wants to borrow all the money previously mentioned for the church off of Nora, and he knows that she's got it because of all the departure benefit money. Matt just going in like that, is coming in hot, and that's not the way to get that.
Coming in direct, isn't he? Coming in hot.
Exactly. So we learn that they're siblings and that their parents died in a fire when Nora was 7. So she's not had much luck throughout her life, I think it has to be said. And Matt, I think it has to be said as well, does try to emotionally manipulate her somewhat by saying how the church is their family church and that their parents left it to her. And this is the first real time in the episode that I was starting to get a little bit uncomfortable with Matt, and starting to have my doubts about him. And what was your just kind of general reaction to this scene, or any specific points?
Yeah, he's got that wide-eyed stare, doesn't he? He can be quite grating on you. I've got a couple of points, really. So first is potentially something rather small. So when you see the family photo at the beginning of the scene, there's a dog in it, and then there's no dog, in the house. So could be several things. The dog could have died in 3 years. I don't know if dogs and animals are affected in the departure. I don't think they are. I don't think it's mentioned. Or the dog could just be in the garden or out with the dog walker. I don't know. I just thought that was an interesting thing.
I think the only thing that's mentioned with dogs is that a load of them went mad on the first on the night of the departure, or on the day of it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a cool link. I will piggyback off. So yeah, that dog went mad.
Kevin may have just got to him first.
Yeah, true.
DK got there. Yeah. And my second point on this is that he's got to raise a lot of money to save a church, and not many people are coming anyway. We're living in the digital age. Coronavirus is coming around the corner. Obviously, he won't know that. If Corona is in that leftovers universe, presumably not. But he should just give up on his dream and save the money and just go virtual, just like the Church of England, for example, are doing right now.
Brilliant. What do you reckon, Phil?
It keeps business plans. The only thing I thought... So this is the scene... It made me think back to, when he was saying about how a little 10-year-old boy prayed for attention.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this is, again, it doesn't fit. The money's not important to him. It's almost about the attention. It's almost about the opportunity to get to preach to people. And that seems to be really, really important to him. So that's the only thing I really thought about. So it's almost quite selfish in his drive to be, still running the church, still keeping it going despite the dwindling numbers.
Yeah, he's delivering the message of God almost, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's a good point. I've not picked up on that before, so that's definitely something to keep an eye out as we go through this. So Nora then offers to loan the money to Matt, but on the condition that he stops his campaign with the flyers and all the rest of it. And then they then argue, and Nora says, "What do you believe in, Matt? Do you know where my family went?" And Matt's best reply is that it was a test, and Nora is just not impressed at all.
Insightful, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you got to do a bit better than that, Matt. Really, it's just anyone can come to that conclusion if you really try. But Matt says the test is not from what happened before, but it's a test for what comes now, afterwards, and how people react to the departure, which is a bit of almost like a meta statement on the leftovers overall. How it's not about the mystery and the build up to it; it's about the people that are left over. He said it. He said the title. If anyone watches Family Guy, you'll get that. And Nora says that Matt is actually failing the test, which I think is a pretty good point because Matt's not holding up too well. And this episode has just really got so much to unpack. It's so good. Go on, Phil.
The only thing I really wondered from this bit was, why is the government paying people money? You're absolutely right. You've raised a lot of good points about how it's purely around the people who are left behind, as the title, I guess you say, indicates. And I find it strange that if his view on the test is now, because then what about that 2%? Why are they not being tested? That was the only real things I could think of. That. Then again, I was trying to work out why the government was also giving people departure benefits. I mean, you don't even get healthcare in America, so why are you getting money for people vanishing?
That is a good point, actually. And it's maybe that's like the government's just best kind of solution. They can't offer an actual answer or anything, so maybe that money will make people happy, which kind of speaks quite a lot to humanity as a whole. That would be the best kind of solution to it. But
and quite a lot.
It's a good question.
And quite a lot, considering he believes from 3 people they get 135,000. Well, at least £135,000. I mean, that's more than £40,000 per person.
So Nora then tells Matt to just let the church and everything go, and he retaliates. And again, this just really just makes me not like Matt at all. He retaliates by telling Nora that her husband was having an affair. And this is just so fucked up from Matt. She's been through enough, and just because she's questioned him, then she's been through so much pain, and he's just going to inflict more on her. And she clearly just has been through so much, like her only reaction is just to kind of like laugh at it.
Yeah.
And it's just so shitty from Matt. And he's a hypocrite for saying that he'll never publish the story, because surely if he believes that it was God's plan and producing all these stories, if he believed it was all meant to be, he'd follow through with every story and he'd not just pick and choose. And this suggests to me that Nora was perhaps right, that Matt just decided one day after being beaten up the first time that it was his calling, and that this is something I was meant to do, because it just seems so strange and inconsistent from Matt. And then Nora just tells him to get out. A really heavy scene. What was your initial reaction, Ant?
Yeah, I totally agree with Nora. Like, considering he's the one coming to ask for money, he totally went about it the wrong way. He's probably channeling some frustration there, just on his life and just the situation as a whole. But you don't do that to your sister. You shouldn't do that to anyone. And well, he's burned that bridge in terms of the money.
Do you reckon that he's telling the truth about it? So I've only just as you were talking through it just then. Do you think there's a chance he's actually lying and making the story up to emotionally manipulate her further? Because we've seen him lie a couple of times throughout the episode.
It's never really said. It's not confirmed, but it'd be a bit. Yeah.
Well,
do you know? I don't think so, but I think the actual reality as it's presented is worse than that, in the fact that he knew and he's kept it from her, but almost used it there. Kept it there to use on her.
Yeah.
When he wants something, or maybe if she pisses him off one time and he's going to tell her, and maybe he'll tell himself that that's not what he's doing, but in not telling her, he knows that that's always there to use, and it's just really fucked up, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is messed up.
Yeah. Any points to make, Phil, before we move on?
What I was wondering about was at one point Nora kind of screams at him, going, "What about what about the accident? What about the judge? And what dirt?" So I was kind of trying to go back several steps. So which accident? The only accident I could think about was on the day of the departure when he crashes the car. When, you find out that he's actually the man who crashed the car in the background of the first episode.
Mm-hmm.
But then, what judge? That's the bit I was quite confused by.
Is it not that he finds out some dirt on a judge? Because we see a flyer at one point about someone who looks, someone like a judge or some sort of government official. And so I think the implication is that he had dirt on someone fairly high up and then got a beating for it.
Okay, possibly then. So for a moment, I'd wonder if it's a case of he'd done something wrong himself. And, he'd not sure what it would be, but what judge, maybe he committed a crime, and then this is all about almost absolving himself, saying, well, people who are much worse than me hypothetically got out, but maybe I've misread that and it is actually just referring to the judge in the flyer on the previous episode.
Yeah, I think so, if my memory's serving me correctly. And I tell you what, dear listeners, this is going to be a super-sized episode. This is proper deep stuff that we're trying to unpack here, a proper dense episode. So I hope you like long podcasts, because next Matt arrives home and it's revealed that he can't even pay his wife's carer just for her evening's work. The walls are really closing in on Matt. We see pictures of Matt and Mary, that's his wife, Matt and Mary's life before her illness. But now I think the illness has left her with what I presume is some sort of locked-in syndrome, something kind of like that. I don't think it's ever fully explained exactly what it is. I think that's meant to be part of the mystery. And we see Matt's good side here directly after seeing probably, I would say, the worst of him. We now see some of the best of him and just how much he cares for Mary. And we get the amazing music come back in again. And one thing that struck me with this is that, we all have partners who we all love very, very much. But, and that sounds like an ominous but, if any of them are listening.
Like, what are you about to be putting down here? Yeah.
No, but
sorry, Laura.
We would all like to think that if anything happened to our partners, that we'd all be as good and caring a husbands as Matt is. But I think the reality is, and I'm not saying it about us, but just in the general world, that lots of people would probably fail and break down and not be able to cope with it. But Matt persists and will take care of Mary, and shows no signs of any kind of resentment towards it, I don't think. And it just shows that he does have lots of good qualities, but he just makes poor decisions and just seems not to judge situations very well at all. And again, just to point out the fucking music is just amazing as Matt's crying and the walls are just really closing in, and it feels like, everything's really been building up to this kind of moment, even though we're only in mid-episode. Phil, just tell me your thoughts on this.
I've got to say, when he starts crying in bed, it's, when we first really see him break, that was I'll admit that was quite an emotional moment even for me, despite the fact I've just watched, all of 5 minutes ago, him emotionally manipulate his sister with some pretty, what I thought at the time, awful things. I was surprised how immediately sorry I felt for the character, and how I'd almost, in my mind, absolved him of everything else he'd done up to that point, just because you see him break and you see how hard his life and reality is. He's losing his church. His wife appears to be suffering some kind of locked-in syndrome. He doesn't have any money at all. And whatever the reason is, for me, that was quite a hefty, really hard scene, but I was surprised at how convinced I was by it. And again immediately swung back to feeling sorry for the character.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
He's very much on his own, isn't he? And even the carer, isn't getting paid, so she's watching TV and said, "Oh, you can give your wife a bath." So he doesn't have any allies or anyone who's really on his side, but that's probably because he's pushing people away from, as Sam said earlier, his poor decision making.
yeah, he definitely feels quite isolated. But then he receives, and again, I told you it would come back up, perhaps some divine inspiration, or something happens. It's not quite clear. Or is it just that the lens he phrases everything through? So when he has an idea, the way he processes things is that it must be some sort of divine inspiration, and that there's the answer, and he's looking for meaning in a potentially meaningless world. Yep, that's a lot to process. I'll just let you guys all think about that. But he's. It struck me that he's about to do what the guy who we made flies about earlier has did. And by that I mean go and take some money and just gamble it all at the casino.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's alright if you win, though, isn't it? I guess.
Yeah, but that's what all gamblers think, though, isn't it? It's if the other guy had managed to win all the money back on his kid's lunch money, then he would have just been providing.
How many great big plans and good ideas have started with, right, we'll go to the casino and we'll turn this into that.
Many a good night started that way.
Phil, I think you've got quite an interesting point here, haven't you?
So it's interesting that he goes, I'll come through this time, because what has he failed at before then, or what does he think he's failed to deliver on before? I assume it's not a casino attempt before, but there's clearly something that he perceives himself to have failed on, and that he's trying to redeem himself for.
Yeah. You'd hope not. In terms of it being something, a gambling thing before, but it does definitely just frame Matt as kind of like this ideas guy, or kind of like, we all know the dreamer, in our lives, that like, this is the next big idea and this is going to work, and, this is going to make me millions, and, it's just, we know it's just not going to happen. So it's kind of framing Matt as this kind of guy, I reckon. So then Matt then goes to get some money that he can go stake at the casino, and he goes to Kevin's, obviously, of course, formerly his father's house, and finds Laurie in the back garden. She's totally busted here. And it's interesting because in the last episode, when she's talking to Meg, saying about how much she let go, she clearly hasn't let go of her old life. And
creeping
I think
around in the back garden, always a good look.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, this is just the brilliance of the leftovers. Obviously, Laurie doesn't talk, but just finding her there, sitting in the swings of a night, with no dialogue from her, just speaks 1,000 words when combined with things we've seen from the previous episode. It's just brilliant. So Matt then says that Garvey Sr.'s left him some money. Laurie doesn't want Matt to tell Kevin that she was there, and he says that she won't. Quite a funny line where he says, "I won't tell if you don't." All right, Matt, chill out. And then Matt then digs up the hidden money, which is actually a pretty significant wad. What do you think of this overall scene, Ant?
I mean, it's definitely powerful with Laurie being there and their relationship. It's interesting how the characters are all starting to link together now. Just made me question why, if you can't pay the carer, he didn't think, I'll dig up, $1,000 of that and sort the carer out. Like, why has he left it to this? Considering, he's only just kind of decided to buy the church, and why is he waited till now? Maybe it's that divine inspiration you were talking about, Sam, with the is there like a bit of light shining on the ceiling when he's lying in bed on a certain part of a painting?
I must admit the painting is something, one of the bits of imagery or something that I didn't get like what the specific point of that painting was meant to be. I don't know if you guys can offer any sort of clarity on that.
I think it's supposed to be, is it Job, who was cursed with... Oh, someone told me about this a while ago.
No. So I think Job, the story of Job is that, I think it's meant to be that the God and the devil are talking, and Job is a deeply kind of religious man, and the devil basically says to God that it's only because all the good things you do for him. If he had a bad life, then he wouldn't be so devout, and so then God lets the devil test him and let bad things happen to then prove that he's then still devout. I think that's it, not 100%.
But then he gets sores, doesn't he? Then at one point, isn't he cursed with sores as part of that? Like he gets sores in his mouth, like he struggles to talk and things, like he can't talk to people. But either way, I think it would make sense if this was Job then, because if he does think he's being tested by, let's say, the devil.
I'll be honest with you, I didn't kind of read into it too much. I was just like, right, it's some sort of religious imagery. That's his sign to press on.
But it's one that turns on.
Go to the casino.
But you see him at the. You see the picture again though later on in the episode on the fire truck when he's dreaming.
Yeah.
And when the house is on fire. That's what made me think about it. That's why I noticed it on the rewatch.
Oh, I never noticed that. I think Phil's coming up yet again with another good point.
Yeah, my man. Every episode.
I'll have to catch that on the rewatch.
Like, don't want to peak too early in this episode. That's why I left it for 45 minutes in. But yeah, that's why it makes sense.
Yeah,
I didn't know the full
of the way
story
through, 45 minutes in, going strong.
Yeah.
Phil, you got anything else to say before we move on?
Yeah, the really weird bit was, why is there so much money buried in the back garden? Because I think it said that the money came from Kevin's dad, who's
yeah.
But there's no real explanation of the relationship up to this point, at least. Also, why is it $20,000 is a significant wad?
Yeah.
In cash.
In cash.
Cash
cash money.
And why did he entrust it to him? So he goes, oh yeah, this is for. Did he say it's for his work or something? Or he said Kevin's dad left it to me.
Yeah, it's meant for Matt, definitely, specifically.
And why? That seemed so. That's one thing I didn't understand was suddenly £20,000. We know he's had money problems before and he's not used it, and he's only just using it now.
Lots of mystery around Matt and Garvey Senior, definitely. So Matt's then driving to the casino and he stops at some traffic lights, and now we see 3 pigeons, not the 2 to represent the departure, but we see 3 pigeons sitting on top of a blinking red light, and this just tells Matt everything he needs to know. I think it's pretty clear that he trusts that this is a message. Then goes to the casino and he insists on playing that specific table that he saw the 2 pigeons on earlier. He doesn't believe that they represent the departure, so all his money is going to vanish. He believes that's the right table, and he then bets all $20,000 on red, of course, and he wins. Yes, okay, great. And then there's a quite loud, fairly obnoxious couple sitting there, and they watch as Matt then doubles down again, bets $40,000, and he wins again, and he rebets again, and he wins again. And again, I've got to ask: is this divine inspiration because of the blinking lights, or is it just pure luck? Phil, sound off.
So it was clear that he saw this as a divine symbol. The lights blinking 3 times, the 3 pigeons. So he clearly saw this as a religious thing, and you can see it in his face as well, the absolute certainty that it's going to go his way each time.
Yeah, I thought I'd echo that. The traffic light blinking 3 times and the 3 pigeons, definitely you should have gone red 3 times, but you probably should have gone black the 4th time, right? Maybe. I don't know. I don't know if that's a step too far. I thought the security staff were actually not the security staff, the casino staff were going to throw him out because he was winning so much. And then yet again, plot armor. he's wearing that roulette plot armor.
Yes, yeah, it's true, because he's took that $20,000 in the space of 4 bets. It's now $160,000, so more than enough to save his church. No, 1 bet to get
3 bets.
3 bets. Sorry,
3 bets.
yeah. And I'm meant to be the maths guy. Fucking hell. Right. Okay. Let's cut that bit out, Phil, please.
I think it's important to show that we're all fallible, Sam. You know, we're all human.
We're all human.
I mean, we left in Coit from last episode, which is still
5 hours of editing, but left that in. Yeah.
If James Aldean's going to be on there, you better believe.
Is that why this episode's so much of a slower pace? Because it's not just making sure we say the right thing.
Yeah,
that's it.
Taking the time.
Well, I know Phil agrees with me on this next point because this next scene that's coming up now is just, it's just so tough to watch.
Yeah. Oh God.
So Matt then goes to his car after winning $160,000, as I've said before, and of course he gets a tap on the window, and it's the guy from earlier, from the quite loud couple. And you're thinking, for fuck's sake, Matt, just lock your car and just drive away. Yeah. Like, you got $160,000. Just be a bit street smart here. Come on. But and of course, the guy wants a bit of money, and Matt's, good nature again kind of shows up here, and gets the better of him, and he offers to give him $2,000, which is more than enough for just a bit of petrol. And you're thinking again, I can't believe you haven't locked the fucking door, because, of course, there's anybody not seeing this coming. The guy just robs him blind, beats him up, takes the 160,000, and you're thinking, for fuck's sake. But then, something quite surprising, they flip it, because Matt then finds just some real kind of inner strength, gets up and just goes and just fucks the guy right up. And then when he gets back in the car, he screams, and he clearly enjoyed that. And what do you reckon about all this?
Yeah, I was absolutely rooting for him, and I think that's why sometimes, you got to judge the situation, and it's not always the right thing to do to help someone, because if you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. And then clearly this guy, was looking for the money, looking for trouble. He didn't come across as sincere. And also, when the guy does take the money, he kind of limbers across the car park, and I think he's trying to get his partner in the car. He should have been a little bit more aware. He wasn't particularly good at robbing that money. He just robbed $160,000. I think I might end up running away or something, or making sure the guy's down.
He clearly underestimated Matt, definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you reckon?
I love the fact he found the strength,
Yeah.
Yeah.
To effectively kill the guy.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was thinking. So I like how this. So exactly as what you were saying earlier, Sam. When I was watching this bit, I was literally screaming at the screen from the drive. I was surprised how invested I was at him doing that. Even my fiance, who hasn't even really watched any of the episodes, was shouting at the screen almost. So it's incredible how committed I got. But I like the fact that the light's on. So when he first gets into the car and looks elated, the light in the car is on, and then it goes off, and it goes very, very dark. Just the moment before the person who will now attempt to mug him, it suddenly gets very dark, and I quite like that use of light there. I thought that was really for shadowing what's about to happen.
That's quite subtle, but
yeah,
it's quite unsubtle once you know it's there.
Yeah,
but quite subtle if you don't. Yeah.
But then. The other thing I'd wondered is, judging by how he's grabbing the man's head and, beating it against the concrete, I was surprised that there was no comeback from doing this. I know he's just tried to rob him of $160,000, but considering that the head of police for the town drops by when he gets, kicked in the stomach in his own church, I'm surprised there's no comeback from this, unless something happens later on that I'm not aware of. He literally nearly or potentially does beat a man to death.
Yeah.
And no one seems to say or do anything.
I think Matt's just wearing that judicial plot armour there, isn't he, Anne?
Yeah, roulette armour, car park armour. Yeah, there you go.
It's all the same. It's all one armour. That's the twist. Matt then goes back to put the money that he dug up back in the jar and back underground, and the swing is moving that Laurie was sitting on earlier, so the fact that it's still moving after presumably this amount of time has passed shows that Laurie's perhaps come back and heard him coming this time and left.
And then, because you made that point, I didn't notice it either, but I think the two swings, empty swings, clearly represents the 2% departed.
There we
Catching
go.
on, Phil. You catching on?
This is it. This is it. Just look for anything in a pair. There you go. So Matt's then driving, presumably to the bank the next morning, and he sees another drive-by attack on the Good Riddance cult that we saw. I think, is it episode 1 or episode 2? I'm not entirely sure, but obviously it was just with the paints the first time. But this time it's a lot more violent as they throw a pretty big rock right at the head. And Matt, of course, stops because, you know, he is caring in these kinds of situations. And then, of course, he then gets himself hit by another attack then.
Yeah, he's used to pull his luck for roulette, hasn't he?
Possibly.
Yeah.
I like how the music also, the song just keeps telling him to stop. I don't know if you noticed, the lyrics of the song is all about kind of like stay, stop. Like
Oh, really?
There's a refrain in the song he's listening to on the radio, and it just keeps saying stop. I don't know if I suspect that's not pure coincidence. I don't think it changes his decision to get out the car in any way. But
Phil, I think you're going to get scouted for some sort of elite podcasting
Oh, no, yeah.
critical analysis. I mean, Sam's watched it 3 times, but Phil's coming out with the
He's got the details, man.
gold medals. Now, then again, like, I'd need to rewatch, and he might be making it up, or
yeah. I'll say it confidently enough.
All just not right. But yeah, we'll go with it. Phil, great point. Well done.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
MVP potential.
What I'm probably missing is something really obvious. That's the thing though. Like, I'll spot the guy in the background wearing, like, you know, a pair of blue chinos, and that clearly represents, I don't know, morning. But I'll miss like the really obvious, actually what's happening in the centre frame.
Sure.
Yeah, you'll miss the swing moving.
Yeah. But what I did think was strange in the scene as well is if you look at the person who's throwing the stones, he's actually dressed all in black, and which is quite a bit of a juxtaposition next to everyone else, the Good Riddance squad, who wear purely white. And it's not like he's wearing black to hide his identity, he's just wearing all black. So semi-wondered if there's either going to turn out to be some kind of rival cult, you know, or if it was just local people going wild, and the fact he's wearing all black is I'm looking too much into it.
Yeah, I think they're just trying
for us to watch.
I think they're just trying to show that contrast, aren't they? Just as striking an image as possible. But I think the writers clearly, in some sort of Back to the Future style thing, heard Ants complaining about dream sequences, and then went back and rewrote a dream sequence right into another episode just for him. And just as a little special for Ant, we're going to take this dream sequence kind of dream by dream or section by section, because I know he loves them.
Yeah. I like that when we turned up to play squash the other day. That's the first thing you said about the episode. Ant is not going to enjoy these dream sequences.
To be honest with you, just before we unpack the dream sequence, so as I've said before, you know, they're not my favourite thing. And at first I thought it was a bit clunky, but then when I rewatched it, I could appreciate just how well done it was. And it's actually very similar in the style where, you know, the dreams are interlinking and there isn't really a clear transition from dream to dream. It's like one big flowing motion to the Batman Lost comic of the Dark Knight's Metal series, which I really enjoyed as well, which is definitely worth a read. So yeah, it's definitely grew on me. But yeah, Sam, I'll let you begin to unpack.
So let's get right into it. So first part of the dream is that Matt's dreaming about a full and vibrant church, clear contrast to what we saw earlier in the episode. And then he follows a young boy outside, which which admittedly does sound dodgy. Before we move on, Phil, anything to say on that little bit?
Yeah, so what I noticed was the woman handing the pamphlets out at the front of the church is also the woman from the Good Riddance squad who's been standing outside.
I think her name is Gladys, by the way.
Okay, Gladys. Yeah, I thought it was, you know, Gladys from the Good Riddance, GGR. But so I thought that was, again, at the first time I watched it through, I didn't really think about it, but I then now think it's foreshadowing what's going to occur later on with the fact that she's outside the church handing pamphlets and, you know, saying, "Oh, it's not too late to come in." Mm.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
And we're assuming the young boy is him as well, aren't we? Because
You maybe are.
so I assumed it was him because
I thought it was too.
the man in the
Mhm.
pulpit is then also the man that you see in the, I'm going to say, hospital room with another woman, and we've not seen that man before. And I assume that he's looking at himself, but where it should be a little boy, it's him sitting on the examination table.
Right. And that's really interesting because what I've put in the doc is that he's seeing himself being told about Mary's diagnosis and that this is maybe linked to Mary's illness. So I saw it like a completely different way.
Yeah, it's because he is. I did wonder that, but it's because you don't recognise the two people either side of him, makes you think that I don't think it would be Mary, and also because he's like, oh, it's spreading, and that's why I was there like, oh well, we know he's had was it leukemia we had?
Yeah, and when we see later the kind of crash, it seems like Mary's had something just kind of instantly happen because obviously she was driving before.
I don't know if she was the driver, but you do see, and I know we're going to come to the same. I'm sorry.
I was just saying she definitely was a driver. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So if she was the driver, you do see in a scene later on that it's her and that they're having sex post the crash, and I'm again assuming things are happening in chronological order through his memories. You know, because he gets the cancer, then the parents die, then there's the car crash, and then you see them having sex.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. That is, the sex is after the crash, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm really, really not sure. I'm not sure about whether the sex is after the crash because I don't know whether it was when the departure happened, whatever happened to Mary happened then,
or if it was just before.
Or maybe that what has happened to her is as a result of the crash. Like I'm not sure. So I'm not. You've convinced me about that. When he's seeing himself, it's actually him seeing himself currently, but it's from when he was younger.
Yeah.
But I'm not convinced that it's all in chronological order. I don't think.
Okay.
I mean, admittedly, the fact it changes from, again, we're kind of skipping dreams here, but the fact it changes from his wife Mary to, is it Laurie that she then sees?
Yeah.
Which obviously didn't happen, but
yeah, we'll come to that in a sec.
Yeah.
So the next dream that we see is the house fire referred to earlier, and we see Matt standing there with a young Nora. Phil, I think you noticed something in here?
Yeah, so this is where I noticed the picture of, I'm going to say it's Job. You can see it hanging up. Is it upside down, actually? I'd have to go back and recheck it, but I thought potentially it's hanging upside down on the fire truck when you see two firemen looking relatively quite laid back, considering the situation, because Stephen the girl goes, oh, why is no one helping them? And you see two firemen kind of leaning against the fire truck, just chatting. And there's the picture hanging up next to it.
I must admit,
in his bedroom.
I didn't catch that at all. So again, fair play for these details. So then we go to the car crash on the scene of the departure from the kind of prologue of the first episode. And again, I've put on here. So Mary seems to have gone into her condition when the departure happened. And, is this the cause of an illness spreading or is there something more to it? And again, Phil, I'm not going to lie, you've completely sent me for a Mayo here because you've just completely changed my whole kind of thoughts. So, Ant, I'll just let you kind of pick up on things here with what you think.
Yeah, I thought her condition was post-crash. I never picked up on her having any sort of condition. I thought I thought she crashed into someone because presumably the other vehicle, someone departed there and that caused her to crash, sending her into the current state she finds herself in.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty settled now on the idea that the crash has then caused her to have this kind of condition because I think she has a head injury, doesn't she? I think she's bleeding from the head, and her condition seems to be something that may be linked to some sort of like brain disorder or brain damage. Yeah, so So
Potentially, yeah, it could be, and from a storytelling point of view, that would make sense.
mhm.
That you kind of keep it in order to keep it neat. It makes sense that on the day of the departure, his whole world fell apart, like it
Yeah.
did for even though he didn't personally lose someone to the departure. Maybe it's a bit like Kevin, and kind of his partners didn't depart, but isn't there anymore. It's clear his wife can't talk, can't communicate. I think you see her eyes move in a couple of scenes,
Mm.
but that's it.
That's very.
So yeah, so
That's very
possibly,
interesting.
but I still, and that's why I then thought, well, the scene afterwards where it's having sex is why I thought initially that maybe it's something that's happened later on, and I assumed it was like a locked-in syndrome rather than an injury.
Yeah. So this is probably the most confusing. Although I will admit that I think I probably do sound pretty confused about this dream sequence. But
it's confusing, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's not really clear if it's chronological, and then
yeah.
some of the things you're about to come onto, it's not clear.
I'll give myself a break because, yeah, you are right. It's meant to confuse you. So Matt then dreams of having sex with Mary, who then changes into Laurie, and then the bedroom sets on fire. And there is just really is a lot to unpack here. So, Phil, did you kind of have any thoughts of what this is all meant to mean, or this part specifically?
So again, initially I thought this was to show that initially when I saw it as his wife, I thought it was just to show that she was still someone after the departure, but now we're not certain if that's the case. But what we see here is something we see with Kevin's character again. So starting off with him dreaming about another woman having sex with someone else, so he's having sexual fantasies about Amy.
Mm-hmm.
And then also he suddenly kind of sees his hands on fire. Well, in the previous episode, we see Kevin standing in a
Forest.
in a forest in a fire pit. It's like, oh, watch, he's standing in the fire pit.
Yeah.
So I thought it was just kind of I wasn't sure if they're trying to show they've got the same struggle or something, but I thought it was interesting that they both appear to be going through exactly the same, almost the same things are occurring.
And these dream sequences both end with part of them being on fire. Kevin's is the legs and Matt's is the hands, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really not sure what all this is meant to mean. So
the way I interpreted the sex dream was it was almost concussion based, and it was happening now, if you were, and then he was kind of reminiscent and having sex with his wife, and I don't know whether it's because he's just seen Laurie, by the swings, the 2% swings, Phil, and that's just his kind of, I don't know, brain just dreaming basically. So I didn't see any more than that really.
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, I think this just shows how it's very open to interpretation. And if any of you guys have got any thoughts, then please do email into us. I'm sure we'll have an email in the description that you can send in your thoughts. And maybe if anyone's got any really good ideas, then we'll read them out on the next episode.
Twitter wars, yeah.
Yeah, Twitter wars, yeah, definitely. So Matt then wakes up in hospital and immediately wants to know the time. He asks the nurse to call the bank to tell them just not to close. He drives over and he manages to get in and he gives the banker all the money, which is amazingly still in his car, even though it's seemingly been left unlocked this whole time. But, and yeah, that is a big but, it turns out it's too late because Matt was actually knocked out for 4 days in hospital. And, despite all of Matt's shortcomings that he does have, and it's clear he's not perfect, this just feels so cruel. Just so cruel. But that's what Matt gets for being a good person and stopping to help the Good Riddance member. I mean, and it begs the question, is this another test, Matt? Just like you said the departure was? Let's be consistent in your logic here. I think that's maybe just something to think about. But so it turns out in the end that it was the Good Riddance Squad or the Good Riddance Cult or whatever you want to call them who have
Guilty
actually
remnant, Sam.
Guilty remnant. Yeah, that's what a few people have heard them have been referring them to. Yeah, exactly. But we know their real names.
What they are.
And knows who they are. And I think it's interesting because, like I say, it turns out that they've brought the church. And the interesting thing is that earlier on in the episode, when Matt asks who's put an offer in on the church, that the banker says that it's kind of like a private equity firm, and it all sounds very sophisticated. So it's interesting that the Good Riddance cult are operating under this kind of umbrella, and their holding company name isn't, the Guilty Remnant, whatever. So there is a good level of sophistication here, and suggests that maybe it's not just kind of Mapleton based.
Mm.
So Matt then sees the Guilty Remnant, and they're painting over the church with all white, and they're just tossing out all the Bibles, and Matt is clearly just not having a very good time of it at all. Phil, just sound off on what you thought about this whole scene.
So I think you're right with them talking about it being quite a complicated operation, because with the amount these people smoke and the amount of writing pads they must get through, someone has got to be backing them with serious money.
Yeah.
That is not a cheap habit for every member of the cult to have. But what I did think was, why would they want to buy a church? Because everything else we've seen about them, and this is kind of me going back to, are they a religion? But up until this point, other than one poster, demonstrating their faith, we've not seen them near churches. They've just owned a couple of houses, I think, or they own a whole cul-de-sac. I think it's stated in the first episode.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Do they want to actually, drive out the other religions, or do they see it more of we just need more room?
Well, I think you're almost there, Ran. So I don't know if you're saying driving out the other religions so they can be the predominant religion, but what I think it is that the Guilty Remnant are actually anti-religion, it would seem, and the fact that the departure even happened for them just completely shows that religion isn't real, and that people, as they said earlier, stop in the first episode, stop wasting your breath, stop wasting your time. It was all wrong. Look what happened. Things are just meaningless now. At least that's the way I kind of see things. Yeah.
Sure.
Phil, anything
did you
else
have
before
something
we?
else?
Yes, so I was also just wondering, what happened to his wife and carer? So he's been out for 3 days now. So for 3 days, and the carer was reluctant, to say the least, to come back and help out. And he said, "Oh, you get all your money tomorrow." So I was kind of wondering what's happened to him. And why has he not gone to see her first? Almost. Why was she not the priority?
Yeah, you just hope that the carer sorted her.
Yeah.
And the thing is, he's got that 160 clap now that he's not spending on the church, so he can definitely afford to pay her.
yeah, exactly. What's he going to do with the money now?
No, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah.
Like I say, you hope that the I was going to say nurse then, the carer has her good nature has shone through, and hopefully Matt will reward her for that. but that is.
Does he just need to look out for 4 pigeons now? Put it on black.
But so overall, that is the synopsis and our little breakdown for the episode scene by scene. So now we'll just give our kind of overall thoughts on the episode, and I'll just quickly start things off with 4 little words. What a fucking episode. Ant, what did you think of it overall?
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed the fact it was just one character, and a lot happens. I think the most exciting part of the episode is obviously the casino sequence and the dream sequence afterwards. There's a lot to go off there. It certainly doesn't keep you bored, and I really like the link with, well, whether it's fatalism, whether it's divine signs, or whatever it is. I can't quite think of the right way to put it, but there's very clearly something at work that can either predict the future or should say how you should act in order for good things to happen. Or, it could be blind luck, but fact that the pigeons are there and they're not explained, I presume more is going to come of it. But I really like that aspect of the show for me. I think that's probably the most interesting aspect for me, rather than the actual departure itself.
if you haven't learned yet, don't expect too much like that to come back up. They'll be
But
more than happy just to let that sit.
but I kind of sometimes enjoy it not being explained as well.
No,
You know, say
absolutely,
for,
absolutely.
series like Game of Thrones, there's certain things unexplained. I kind of like that sometimes. It's annoying, but I grow to like it. So, Phil,
No,
what did you think?
so sorry. Just before we go to Phil, just want to just finish off on that kind of point about the, the kind of mystical or perhaps divine things happening, and the fact that they don't give a specific answer is just part of the brilliance of this episode, because it does really leave it so open to interpretation. And for doing a podcast on, and that we could do an episode that lasts well over an hour, and the discussion hasn't gotten old or stale or anything. But that I just wanted to make that little point and just again reiterate how much I love this bloody program. Sorry, Phil, go on. What do you think overall?
No, overall, right there with you. 4 words. Loved it. Fully loved it. 5 words, sorry. I can't count. But yeah, I like the fact there is no attempt in this episode to explain The Departed, other than to try and disprove the idea that it's, that it's all the good people have gone. I think it's a really good shout out there. And earlier on when you're saying it's, with it being by the roulette table, is that just, complete chance? And it's nothing to do with people's behaviour. I'd love to see what they're going to do with Matt's character now that the key thing that he's been working for, so to keep the church going and to keep his paper going, has kind of collapsed. I was wondering if there's something I was supposed to take from the episode that I'm then going to be using in future episodes. There's no kind of big reveals other than the fact the guilty remnants have bought the church. So I was wondering if this story will then be built on any further. If that makes sense.
We'll find out, won't we?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we're gonna find out. But that's the I'm really looking forward to finding that out. That's the kind of it's keeping me guessing.
Yeah, and I think obviously no kind of future spoilers, but as you've kind of alluded to there, this episode doesn't really do anything to set up any bigger mysteries that are really going to be explored. If there are links in, they're maybe going to be kind of more thematically or like small references, because as you've said, the main focus on this episode, I think it was Ant that said, is just on the character, on Matt. It's obviously an anomaly in the episode that he's in every single scene. We haven't had that in previous episodes. We've been going from Kevin to Jill to Tom. Thank God there's no Tom in this episode. And so, the fact that they've... And this is a bold move, I think it has to be said. For, the third episode of a TV programme, people are still going to be undecided. And, if you haven't tuned into the first two, then, I was about to be honest, I was about to say, you might not understand what's going on, but it's just kind of occurred to me, this could almost work as like a short film, just by itself. Just a singular kind of, bit of art by itself. It works brilliantly, of course, in the Leftovers setting, but it doesn't, you could just show this to someone who'd never seen the programme before.
Yeah, and it'd be a real kind of view on someone's faith and trying to hold it together. Yeah, you're right, you probably could actually. It's very good. If it is going to be a standalone episode, it was a fantastic standalone episode, even if they never build on anything else in it.
Yeah, and I think it's just a great way, because as Matt will be in the story a bit more, I don't think that's a spoiler to say, he, you can try and view everything going forward kind of through the lens of what we've learned in this episode. And I think just one final point that I'll make before we signed off is that maybe Matt, just like Nora, as we've seen in the previous episode with the gun, is doing his kind of campaign and all his kind of like quite out there antics and trying to almost seems like cause a bit of trouble. He would say not, but it's how it kind of comes across to me. Is that, and perhaps he's doing all this in order to try and feel something again, as Amy says in the previous episode, because he feels perhaps a little bit helpless in his life. His wife is quite ill, his church is failing, and he's got massive money problems. And I just want to sign off just by saying that Matt, in one episode, is shown to be such a very complex and quite layered guy, but in a very different way to Kevin. You're not questioning Matt's sanity, but you do question his motives. Whereas with Kevin,
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Have you guys got anything else to say before we sign off?
just a final point from me. Just shout out to the banker in a pretty bleak universe. That is the leftovers. Like he was one of the 100% good guys from what you can see, and no ulterior motives or anything open to interpretation. My man's just trying to help.
Yeah, interesting as well that the guy that they have almost being the pure character is a banker who in most media are portrayed as the bad guys,
Exactly.
and potentially in real life. So no, that's definitely very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, guys, I hope you.
So before we call it off, what did you think to the title of the episode? And how do you think that it plays on it?
It's referring to a joke I've actually heard before. I don't know if you know this, Phil.
Yep.
But basically, it's two boats and a helicopter, isn't it? And there's a guy stuck on a roof after a storm or tsunami or something, and he prays to God to rescue him. And then a guy comes up on a canoe, and he says, "Do you want to hop in?" He says, "No, I'm waiting for God." Then a guy on a speedboat comes up, and he says, "Do you want to hop in? I'll save you." He goes, "No, I'm fine. I'm waiting for God." And then a third person comes to rescue him on a helicopter, and then again the guy stuck on the roof goes, "No, I'm waiting for God." And then eventually, he doesn't get rescued, so he drowns. And then in the afterlife, he says to God, "Well, where were you? I was praying for you." And then God says, "No, I did come. I sent 2 boats and a helicopter. What more do you want than that?"
Well, on that note, I think that's a nice little point to sign off on. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. As always, we really appreciate it. I know this was, as I said earlier, quite a supersized episode, but I hope you stuck with us through the whole thing and enjoyed it. Again, just thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Well done, guys, and well done for sticking with us. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.